There. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone being here today. We're going to go over making accessible PowerPoint templates because most of us on campus use PowerPoints at some point. And we need to make sure that those PowerPoints can be easily seen and consumed by a wide audience, whether people have disabilities or not. Not to mention that accessibility features included generally help make things a little bit more readable for lots of people, regardless of their disability status, we'll say. So I'm going to put a link in the chat, and this is a link to the web page on the Marcom website that has this accessible PowerPoint template. I highly encourage everyone to download it, whether it's right now or at some point, but we put a lot of work into ensuring that this template is accessible, and also put a lot of work into explaining step by step how to maintain the accessibility of this template. Things can be the most accessible ever, and as soon as you go in and change something, if you don't do it the right way, you break all the accessibility things. So what I'm going to do, we have 50 minutes today. And what I'm going to do is just kind of step through some of the instructions that are in this template, but everything is spelled out. So hopefully this will be very easy for people to use. And I do apologize, the speaker notes section, I can't quite figure out how to make that information more larger, basically. So I encourage everyone to read through the speaker notes. That's where most of the instructions are. So again, built-in accessibility, this slide says basically what I just said. We want to try to maintain the accessibility features within this template to allow a wider audience to be able to read the content. Highly recommend to save the template and then create a copy so that you always have the original instructions available. The colors and font styles are from the Oswego Visual Identity and Brand Standards, which are linked in this template. So again, highly recommend sticking with these to maintain consistency for the Oswego brand. We also recommend not to reduce font sizes too much. Do not use all caps. These things kind of go against accessibility principles and can make things a little bit more difficult for people to read. And then once again, also, we suggest trying to avoid adding elements to slides when possible. There is a wide variety of slide layouts within this template. So we try to recommend not adding things to the template because that makes it a little more difficult for screen reader users to follow along. It can mess up the order of the individual elements on the slide. Okay. In this template, slides 2 through 7 are for instructional purposes only, so those can be deleted. You simply right-click, and I don't know if you guys can see that. Oh yeah, you can. Okay. Right-click on a slide, and then you can select delete. If you want to shift and click, you can highlight a number of slides and then delete those. So obviously, when you give your final presentation, you want those instruction slides out of there. So, okay. Slide 6 gives instructions on how to download the Roboto font, which is, again, based on Oswego's visual identity and brand standards. This may already be part of your computer, so double check your font selection to see if you have Roboto, and if you don't, there's instructions on how you can download it. If you have any questions about using this template at any point, you're welcome to email me directly. You can also reach out to the work group on accessibility practices. Their email is accessibilitypractices@oswego.edu. We also have some individual, for general questions and information about accessibility overall. You can check the digital accessibility website, and we do have written and video tutorials that specify PowerPoint as well as other applications. So, okay. Jumping into the actual PowerPoint. Again, in the speaker notes section, I kind of highlight each individual aspect that we want to look at. Every slide needs to have a unique slide title. You shouldn't have the same title on each slide twice. In the template, the title boxes are listed as such. There is a difference between a title box and a regular text box. Each slide needs to have its own title box. So again, we recommend do not delete the title boxes, but have an individual unique title for each slide. For images that are on the slides, you need to provide text equivalents, also called alternative text. This provides a brief description of the image that's being used so that someone who is not sighted or has visual impairments can get the same information as someone who sees the picture directly. To access the alt text, sorry, I'm kind of going on a whim here and I got too many things open, so I got to get things out of my way. To access the alt text, we want to right click on the picture, and about in the middle of the menu, we have this alt text option, and that will open up a side view. And then you can, I have alt text in here already for the majority of these pictures, but if you replace the pictures, then obviously you need to add in your own alt text. Just basically one quick sentence, maybe two, that gives a very brief description of what is being seen in the image. Again, if we right click on the text, we have a change picture option, and you can select from a file, which is your local computer. You can also select other stock images or online sources, or you can add an icon. I wouldn't really recommend an icon for a big hero image, but for smaller images, you can add icons. So you could use any one of those options to import a different picture. All right, and then adding alt text. If a picture, in the instance of like an icon, say, if a picture is being used for strictly decorative purposes and it has no real meaning, it doesn't really add anything to the slide, you can always mark it as decorative. And in order to do that, when you highlight the picture and open up the alt text selection, down here, sort of at the bottom, we have a mark as decorative option. So if you simply click on that and toggle it, this allows a screen reader to, it basically allows a screen reader to skip the image. So the person using a screen reader would not get any additional information. But again, if the picture is strictly decorative or just kind of filling space, then that's okay. Moving on to the next slide. Again, having an individual title for each individual slide or having a unique title for each individual slide. We do recommend using the built-in layouts. As I mentioned, there are a lot of different structured layouts within this template. This allows consistency. It makes it easier for you, the content creator, the PowerPoint creator, rather than spending time adding elements or trying to like create your own slides. We recommend using the built-in formats. And maintaining the original format of the slide also allows assistive technology to read the slide elements in the order that they were intended. Body text on all slides should be a minimum of 24 points. Smaller than that, and it makes it very difficult to read. So if you have a lot of information on a slide, first of all, there shouldn't be a whole ton of information on one slide. If you have information that becomes too overwhelming for one slide, we recommend splitting it, basically duplicating the slide, adding a unique title, and then splitting out the information so you can still maintain the 24-point font size. So to duplicate a slide, simply highlight the slide on the left-hand side. Again, right-click, and we have a duplicate slide option. So that will just create a whole new slide for you. If you want to add a slide, we come to the Home tab up at the top. And this sort of second little area has a new slide option. You can click on that and it will create the same slide as what you're on. And then if you want to change the layout, the first very small icon in that second area is the layout option. And you can highlight that, open that, and then simply select whatever layout it is that you would like. PowerPoint does that awesome thing where it makes suggestions for you. I don't like that. There's a way to turn it off. Okay. I will note also when you duplicate a slide, the speaker notes are also duplicated. When you add a slide, there will not be any speaker note information in it. So you'll have to kind of refer to another slide that has the specific information. Adding a slide title, adding another text. To add bullet points, we have the list icons about in the middle of the ribbon of the Home tab. So if you select the Home tab and then come to about the middle, we have either the bullets or the numbered icon, and that allows you to create a list. We recommend using either the bullets or the numbers rather than just typing in the numbers yourself, because again, this helps with digital accessibility. Obviously, that's the point of this. A screen reader will note list of 3 items or list of 2 items as I have it here. So the screen reader user will be able to understand that they're listening to a list. All right, a lot of the instructions in the speaker notes are duplicated from slide to slide just to make sure that everybody understands the instructions. So to make sure that nothing gets missed. So again, talking about alt text, adding images, making images decorative, and so on. All right, if we come to the next slide, this is a chart. Charts and graphs do need alt text, and they also do need to be aware of color contrast. So for example, you'll see in this chart, we have a green bar, a yellow bar that has a black outline, and then the first bar in each group has a pattern associated to it. And that's to ensure that people who are colorblind can still receive the same information. If colors within a graph or chart are too similar, someone who has low vision or color blindness may not be able to distinguish those 2 colors. So we recommend using patterns or outlining a color with a separate color, outlining a color with black to make sure that it can be distinguished. I do go over, I'm not going to go into details on a chart just for sake of time, but on slide am I on? Slide 13 in the speaker notes, I do go into specific directions as to how to change out each of the chart elements. So again, I talk a little bit about color. In order to ensure that color meets the contrast standards, I have a link to the TPGI color contrast analyzer, and I have that on my computer already. I'll open that really quick. I apologize, I didn't have that ready, but that allows you to check the contrast for specific colors, and it will tell you whether it meets accessibility standards or not. Again, this goes down into a rabbit hole pretty quickly. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this just so we can kind of continue moving through. But I do want to mention it. And I would encourage everyone to either download the TPGI color contrast analyzer, which is what I'm going to use. I do believe I also have a link in here for the WebAIM color checker, which is very similar in nature. All right, can we see you guys can't see my color contrast analyzer, can you? Let me stop sharing for a moment and I'm going to try that again. Tartar sauce. And yes, I took that from SpongeBob. Thank you, SpongeBob. Okay. I don't know if I can very easily share the color contrast analyzer. Basically, what it does is it allows you to see the foreground color, which would be the text or these individual bars, against the background color, which is the color of the page or the color of the section. And it will tell you whether those colors meet the contrast standards. If they don't meet the contrast standards, then you kind of have to pick another color or figure out a way to differentiate. So again, using a black outline is one way to differentiate. Using a pattern is another way to differentiate. So there are specific instructions in that slide, slide 13. If anyone has any questions on color, you're welcome to either ask today or email me. As I mentioned, it can be kind of a rabbit hole. You can go down that pretty quickly. So I don't want to spend too much time on that today just for sake of the rest of the PowerPoint. All right, moving on to tables. This is now slide 14. Again, we need to keep color contrast in mind. A lot of the tables that are within the PowerPoint system may not necessarily include the appropriate color contrast. So again, I highly recommend using either the TPGI or WebAIM contrast checker to be sure that the text has sufficient color contrast against the background. That's the most important part. So I go into details on slide 14 about how to add the table. I will note in the remediation work that I've done in PowerPoint specifically, people like to use screenshots of tables, and I would not recommend that. The reason being, when you use a screenshot, it's essentially an image. It is an image. When you use an image, you need to provide alt text for all of the information that is contained within that image. So for a table, depending on how complex the table is, it contains a lot of information. The better way to include that information to make sure that people using screen readers can access that info is to insert a table, like I call it an interactive element, to insert an interactive element directly. That allows you to set table headers, which are very important. If we come out to, I clicked on the table, so that's highlighted. And then I opened up the table design tab. And we have this header row option. So we want to make sure that that header row option is checked. That indicates that the header, the first row, is indeed a header row. You can also include the first column option to indicate that that is also sort of a header element. You can have banded rows, which alternates the color, or you can uncheck that and have unbanded rows. I don't know, just straight rows. I think it's useful to have the banded rows because it helps you differentiate the information from one row to the next. So this is the other reason, this is the main reason that using the interactive element is better than using a screenshot. Because again, for a screenshot for an image, you would need to include all of the table information in the alt text, which is not recommended and very cumbersome. Again, I talk about color checking to make sure that the text the text with the background meets the standards. And everything else is repetitive. And then we have the text down here at the bottom. Again, try to keep the text on the slide a minimum of 24 points. So that's found right here. We're on the home tab. And once I clicked on the text box and highlighted that, we can see that it is a Roboto font and it is at 24 points. If there's too much information that would reduce the font size, I would recommend maybe adding another slide and then giving all of the information in that second slide. This is our quote slide. Moving on to the next one. This is again labeled as a title box. So please don't delete that. Use that as the unique title, and you can add a very short quote. Sometimes I see this specifically on websites when I add testimonial components. Sometimes people have a lot to say about Oswego or their individual department, which is great, but you don't want the text to be too small. You don't want the quote to be too large to kind of overtake the whole slide. So again, as you're adding the information, you can extend the text box size a little bit, but you want to keep the quote itself very short and concise, so that you can keep the font size large and make that point. And then repeated information for the image, you can right click and change out that picture. You can add someone else's headshot. When you do, you want to be sure to add the alt text for that person's name. And then again, add the person's name down at the bottom of the slide. If anyone has any questions as I'm going along, please feel free to either interrupt me or shoot them in the chat, and I will do my best to get to them as quickly as possible. A lot of this information, once again, is sort of repeated. So we have the title slide, a unique title. I will mention the purpose for a unique title. And, all right, sorry, interrupt myself just a little bit. At the end of this template, I will show you how to run the accessibility checker within PowerPoint. And that will give you a very bare bones basic analysis of any missing elements or any accessibility features that could be improved. The reason for having an individual slide title is so that screen reader users can understand what slide they're on. So if you have 4 slides that have the same slide title, it gets very confusing to people using screen readers. I will admit it also gets very confusing to me as a sighted user, depending on what kind of information is on that slide. So it's just a little bit better to have unique slide titles to differentiate. And that can be something as simple as, you know, title of slide 1, title of slide 2, that type of thing, just to differentiate them. And that's one of the things that gets picked up with the accessibility checker that I will show you at the end of the template. Repeated information, adding an image, adding alt text, having the image caption, making sure that the font is big enough. So we're going to kind of skip through some of these that are basically just repeated information. Title for an appendix slide. These all have individual like titles, like this is an appendix slide. You can put whatever information you want in here. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any bit of difference. And if there's an extra title box or an extra text box that you don't feel is necessary, you want to remove that, you can simply hit the delete key and it takes it out. For text boxes that are not used, if there's no information in a text box, it will not show up in the slideshow version. So if you're running a slideshow and you have an empty text box, it will not be seen on the slideshow itself. However, that is one of the things that kind of gets flagged in the accessibility checker. So anything that's not used, you can go ahead and go through and delete. All right, moving on to our agenda. We've got the image again, changing that out, making sure there's alt text. I'll talk a little bit more about alt text. Alt text is very subjective. The meaning of the image can sort of change depending on how the specific image is being used in the context of that slide. So this is an image of a young woman, a student, presumably sitting in front of what I assume is Penfield Library with a tile mural behind her. This could technically be used as a decorative image. If it's just there to show the beauty of our campus or, you know, to fill the space, it could technically be called a decorative image, in which case you could toggle this mark as decorative option. The alt text that I have for this particular image says a woman wearing an Oswego t-shirt sitting on a bench in front of a wall mural. So it's not giving a lot of detail, but that's kind of okay. If the content on the slide is talking specifically about who this woman is or the building that she's in front of, perhaps you want to add a little more detail and say like, this is Kate DeForest sporting an Oswego t-shirt sitting outside of Penfield Library. If that information is not relevant to the other content on the slide, it's not really needed. I once attended a conference and met a man who was blind, and we were in an alt text session together. And he said to me, I only need to know what I need to know. And that thought has stuck with me. So when you're dealing with alt text, you really only need to convey the information that's needed, right? So in this particular image, or in this particular instance, if the other content on the slide is not relevant to who this person is, then you just need a very brief overview, a woman with an Oswego t-shirt sitting in front of a mural. Same type of idea. We have another woman in a green Oswego t-shirt standing outside. If the information on the slide is pertinent to who she is, then you want to add a little more context to that image, but otherwise you could just say pretty much the same alt text that was in the previous slide. Again, we have our title box. You want to keep that and maintain the unique title. We have our bullet points, 2 columns. So one text area with bullet points and another text area with bullet points. Make sure that that font size stays at 24. If there's more information or you need to expand that and the font size is going to get too small, again, I recommend duplicating the slide or adding a second slide that has continued information on it, or somehow reconfiguring, maybe not using this layout for that particular set of information. Title for our timeline slide. Now these icons can be changed out. Again, if we right click, you can select change graphic. And then if we select the from icons option in PowerPoint, this is one of the things that I like about PowerPoint. It has all of these sort of predetermined icons, and we can go through and just check whatever one we want, hit insert, and that will change it out. That will bring that into the slide. The other thing that I kind of like about using PowerPoint icons is if you'll notice over here in the alt text section, it has abacus outline as the alt text, which once again, it's pretty much all it is. An icon is generally used to, for decorative or for, I guess decorative is the best word. So it doesn't need a big explanation of what it is. Just saying that it's an outline of an abacus is sufficient. If we do want to change the color, a lot of the colors are already set in this template, as I had mentioned, to stick with the brand standards. This milestone text box is preset at green. If you want to set it to black, for example, you would just highlight it. So I have this milestone 1 box highlighted. On the home tab, we come up to the top and we see this A with the red below it. That is the font color option. We have our theme colors listed here across the top, and the green is, hopefully you can see, it's highlighted in white. So that means that that is the one that's currently selected. We can change that to black. And then, I don't know if you can tell, but the milestone 1 is black and milestone 2, 3, and 4 are all green. Let's change milestone 2 to something really obnoxious. Let's change that to like a purple. There, I don't know if that made it better, but hopefully you can see that milestone 1 is black and milestone 2 is purple. With PowerPoints, I mean, if you're representing Oswego at a conference or something to that nature, and you want to kind of stick with the branding and the preset colors, of course, we recommend staying with the theme colors that we've set. But there's nothing to say that you can't change it to something else. With that said, a purple text on the white background, that's going to be kind of questionable as to whether that meets accessibility standards. So you could check that with again, one of the color checkers. And yeah, I don't think you can see my color checker again, but we're gonna check it anyway, and I'll tell you the results. The TPGI color checker has an eyedropper icon. So you can select the eyedropper icon and then very carefully put that icon on something of the color that you want, which is the purple. That purple, this purple that I've selected for milestone 2, against a white background, to my surprise, passes accessibility contrast standards. So you could keep that, and people with low vision or color blindness should theoretically be able to see that color difference. I will also mention for color, when you're using color, because of low vision and color blindness, you should not rely on color alone to relay information. So if this milestone 2 is somehow very prominent and you want to emphasize the importance of that, using the purple alone is not sufficient enough. You should also include a second attribute, such as a bold. We're going to make that bold, or you can italicize something else to make that text stand out. Screen readers do not read color. They completely ignore any color changes at all. So someone who's using a screen reader is going to only hear the text that's in these text boxes. They're not going to be notified of any color whatsoever, which is why you need to use a secondary attribute. So making it bold changes it. A screen reader will alert the screen reader user that that text is bold. Same for italics. If you want to make the background color, like if you want to make a highlight background color, the screen reader still may not alert that. So that's a little bit like questionable for straight up screen reader users. So it's recommended for text, if you're trying to highlight or emphasize something, bold or italics is the best way to do that. All right. Do we have any questions so far? I've been talking for a little bit, so we're just going to kind of pause for a moment, let everybody kind of catch their breath. Any questions on anything that I've said thus far? I don't see anything popping up in the chat. Okay, we'll continue on then. The meet the team slide. This is a good slide for, obviously headshots, to introduce maybe new members of the team and that kind of thing. Click the icon to add a picture. If you click on that, it brings up your local computer, and then you can navigate to wherever you need to be. And I don't know what that is, but we'll select that and insert and pop that into the picture icon. Now, if we look over at the alt text option, we see a person smiling for a selfie, and then down below it, it says AI generated content may be incorrect. So based on the image that AI can see, it gave me a very generic, basic alt text. That might be fine. In this particular instance, where presumably for a meet the team slide, you're introducing team members, you want others to know who that person is. So we're going to delete that AI generated alt text, and we're just going to say Kate DeForest. You could say Kate DeForest standing in front of a window, smiling for a selfie, whatever. But again, is that extra information needed? If the whole purpose is to just introduce Kate DeForest as a new member of the team, then you only need the name and that's it. And then of course, the other text on the slide, you can put the person's name and then add their brief title. Sometimes people's titles get pretty long, so you may feel the need to condense that and make the font smaller, which is not the end of the world, I will say. It just makes it a little bit harder to read depending on how much information is on the screen. And again, in the speaker notes, I go over slide title, font size, adding a slide, images, adding alt text, all of that I've already repeated. Or a stats slide. Now you may notice that the number 685 is the largest thing on the slide, aside from the image, but the text box above it says title for stats. That is the actual title of the slide. So again, do not delete that text box. You want to use that. And if you want the title to be the biggest thing on the slide, you can change the size of things. You can make the text boxes bigger or smaller. I have everything locked. If you'll notice very closely here, all of these little points on the text box have a little mark through them. That means that that element is locked, so it can't be changed. I'm going to give you guys a little industry secret. If you right click on the box, one of the options that pops up in that option menu is unlock. That unlocks it. Now you can see those points don't have the little cross mark in it anymore. So you can change the size of the text box. So we can make that a little bit smaller. We can highlight the 685,000 that I already have in there, and we can change the font. We'll push that down to 20. No, we're not going to push that to 20. We're going to push that to 28. And then the title for the stats is also locked. So we want to highlight that and unlock that text box. We can make that text box bigger and push that font size up to 60. And then again, we have the icons. You can change those out as I've already talked about. These numbers are just here as placeholders, so you can change those to whatever you want it to be. And then again, the image, you can change out the image, make sure that you have alt text in there. So this is all pretty much duplicate information. Again, we see here we have a text box that's a little bit smaller, and then the title text box. So if you want to switch those around, you can do that, or you can make the size of the text box a little bit bigger. However, keep in mind, making the text box and the font size larger does not constitute adding a title, which is why all of the unique titles in the slides are listed as title boxes. You want to keep those title boxes intact in order to allow screen reader users to be able to access that information, to understand that that is the title. Adding a caption, we have the white text on the green background. If we make that black text on a green background, that will not meet color standards, color contrast standards, and will not easily be seen. So again, we recommend keeping the lighter text on the darker background and maintaining the darker text on the lighter background. Oswego's colors are green and gold, as we all know. Gold or yellow is a very problematic color when it comes to color contrast standards. So trying to add yellow text is not really recommended unless it's a very large title or unless it's on a green background. The yellow on the green is okay. Yellow on white tends to be very problematic for color standards. So again, try to keep the color checker in mind, use the information from that. And if you have any additional questions on that, please feel free to email me or talk to someone else from the accessibility work group. And we're happy to answer any questions on that. This is all same information, adding text, keeping the title box, changing out the image. So we're just going to kind of continue to skip ahead for safety of time. We have the big image. Now this, again, the image is locked. If you'll notice the little points on the box, if you want to make that image smaller, we can unlock that box and you can certainly scale down the image size. Don't know that that would really be recommended for this particular slide. Again, we want to try to avoid adding elements to a slide. So you might be tempted to like make the slide or make the picture smaller and then add a text box. But that messes up the order of the elements and could very much be problematic for a screen reader user. So in that case, I would recommend finding a different layout that might be a little more appropriate. We're on the home tab now. If we go up here to the top where we see new slide, once again, that very top little icon is the layout option. And you can select a different, we'll select one of these options down here, select a different layout that allows for a smaller picture and a text box. And then we have our contact slide, again with the icons. The alt text for these icons is simply a person icon. I think this says phone icon, email icon, and location icon. So that's just, they're fairly decorative, but it's not bad to have them still listed. It's not bad to have the alt text still listed, just so a person who's using a screen reader would understand that they're there. Same for the thank you slide with the icons and the text. And again, I know this text is currently at 20 points. We want to be careful with that. 24 is sort of the recommended size. 20 isn't terrible, but if you go down, like if we make that a lot smaller and we make it a 12 points, that's going to be very difficult to read, even if it's on a big screen. So even if you're in an in-person meeting and you're projecting it on a big screen, the 12 points is going to be very, very difficult for anyone to read. So that's the purpose behind maintaining it at either 24 or 20. That's all the same information that we've gone over, replacing icons, replacing text. And then in the template, we do have some icons that were previously used. We also have a slide that has the contact icons and then social media icons. So you can add those in if you'd like. And then I give instructions on how to add those into another slide. So for example, if we want to add the Facebook, we highlight the Facebook icon. We want to right click and then copy. And we come to the other slide that we want. We highlight the icon where we want it to go. We highlight where we want to put the Facebook. And then we simply right click and paste. Oh, sorry, that didn't do exactly what I wanted it to do. So we can delete that icon and move the Facebook right in there. So those instructions are in the icon slides. And let's see, the last slide in the slideshow is the automated checker, which we'll go over really quick. So this gives you a basic rundown of any accessibility issues that it flags. It's not the end all be all. It's a good place to start, but it definitely needs some human knowledge behind it to fix whatever issues are brought up. So from the top navigation ribbon, we're going to select the review option and then select check accessibility. And we have an accessibility assistant that opens up over here on the side. We've got our color and contrast, a hard to read text contrast. So if we click on the little arrow, it'll tell us where that is. Where is that? Oh, I think it's indicating that this text that's over the green background is not appropriate, which is okay because theoretically we would replace that text with an image. So this makes it a little bit easier. I just clicked on one of the suggested colors and it changed the text to the lighter gray. So now if you did want to have text over that green background, that would be acceptable. And as you can see here, we have the hard to read text contrast, which is now a check mark. So that means that that passes the contrast. We don't have any missing alt text in any of our images. Okay, here we go. We got a missing slide title. Is that right here? That's the same one. So that tells you that every slide needs to have a slide title. So if you've skipped one or if you deleted the slide title box, the accessibility checker will let you know that. Same for duplicate slide titles. As I mentioned previously, we want all of the slides to have unique individual titles. And if you'll remember, I duplicated a slide early on. And so that's probably, yep, where that duplicate slide title comes in. So that's telling me that that's going to be problematic. So again, we just want to come in and add a 2 to make that different. And then the check reading order. Okay, we're not going to go through all 26 of these, but this is the reason that we want to maintain the template order and we don't want to add extra elements into the slides. PowerPoint has the order of each individual element built in. So this is explaining people who cannot view the slide will hear the slide text read in a specific order. The template generally has that order built in. When you add a new element, it could theoretically mess up that order. It could just throw the element in somewhere completely random on the slide and be out of order from what your intention is. In order to check that, I have to remember where to go to check that. We want to go up here to the very top where it says arrange, which is about in the middle of the top ribbon navigation. And then we find the selection pane. And we open up the selection pane, and this shows you each individual element that's on that slide. The desktop version of PowerPoint reads the slides from the bottom to the top. So the title slide should always be at the bottom. And then this next text placeholder will be read. This template was created to include accessibility features. The next text box will be read. And then we have the footer down at the very bottom and the slide number at the very bottom. The cloud version of PowerPoint reads it the opposite way. The cloud version reads it from top to bottom. This particular template was created on the desktop version, so I'm only going to stick with that. So we're going to assume that the screen reader would read it from the bottom up, which is why when you add another element, it could throw it in somewhere and mess up the reading. So if we want to change the order of this, we simply highlight and drag and drop somewhere else. Okay, are there any questions on the accessibility checker or the slide or the reading order? I know that can get a little bit, it can feel like a little bit much sometimes. All right. We have two tabs open here over on the right-hand side. We have the selection pane tab, and then we have our accessibility assistant. So we're going to flip back over to our accessibility assistant. As I mentioned, we're not going to check the reading order of all 26 of those slides. We have all other check marks, which means basically on a basic level, the accessibility for this template is good to go. We can save it. Of course, being the desktop version of PowerPoint, I don't have auto save turned on. So anything I do has to be saved manually. So we hit the save button. All of my changes have now been incorporated. And I could either share this with other people or present it either in Zoom or in an in-person meeting. And anyone looking at this would most likely not have much of an issue. We will never be 100% accessible to 100% of the people 100% of the time. So just be aware of that. There may be someone somewhere who says, oh, I couldn't really access this thing that you did. But going through all of these steps and paying attention to the instructions that are in the slide notes of this particular template will help boost accessibility as much as possible, and will help ensure that the widest audience is able to read, consume, and use your PowerPoints effectively. So my clock says 11:48, just about out of time. I want to pause one last time and see if anyone has any questions before we end and log off. All right, I don't see anything in the chat. Once again, there is more information on our accessibility website. You can get to that at oswego.edu/accessibility. Check out the tutorials page. We have video tutorials, we have written tutorials. This particular template is available on the communications and marketing website under the toolkit page. So please feel free to download that, make a copy of the original so you always have the instructions handy, and then go to town. Have fun making accessible PowerPoints.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
All right. Thanks everybody for your time today.